right, next up we're gonna do a tour of all the button switches around the camera. Stick with this if you feel like you know your camera pretty well. I bet you're gonna learn at least one thing along the way, and we're gonna be demoing some of the buttons and switches as we go along. So the first one is our focal plane mark, which is located right here. And basically what that is where the sensor resides in the camera. So if you're one of these people who want to do some calculations, you can actually know exactly where from the focal plane mark out to where the minimum focus distance for the camera will be. So right here is a marking. Just about every lens that I know of has a marking on here, and I'll tell you the minimum focus distance. So it's 0.39 meters or 1.3 feet for this particular lens, which is the 18-135. Next strap. Might seem really obvious, one on either side, obviously, but one thing I wanted to mention is if you do get an extra accessory, battery grip, you can put it on the bottom here, and then this one on this side, when you put your hand around it and you've got the battery grip here, you can have kind of like a camcorder style type strap that goes around your hand this way, and then you can hold it better with one hand basically. So I just thought I'd mention that if you're interested in holding your camera that way. All right, next up we're going to talk about the Hotshoe, or in our case, really a cold shoe. I mount a lot of different things on here, like LED lights sometimes. But most of the time, I'm usually mounting my Sennheiser G3 series. Really nice mic. I got it listed on my gear page. I compared it against the Sony and the Asden, and this is the one I picked. But basically, you just slide it onto your cold shoe and torque down. Then you take your cable and plug it into your microphone input. So basically, when the camera's on and I press the flash button right here, nothing happens, which it's intelligent and it knows that, hey, there's something in the Hotshoe. But if I press it now, you'll know it popped up. Obviously in our case, this whole flash unit around here, we're not going to use for video, so we're not going to really talk about that. But I just wanted to point that out. If you hit the flash button, don't worry about it because it knows there's something in our cold shoe. All right, dioptric adjustment right here. This allows you to adjust your eye to the viewfinder. So basically what I do, and this is more a stills related item, but since we're using stills as a tool for video, I'll explain. So basically when you look through the viewfinder, as you can see here, you want to hold the camera up to your eye and turn the camera on, press the shutter halfway down so you can see the green overlay on the bottom. And then what you want to do basically is rotate this until the text becomes clear for that particular eye. And for me, it's about right there. So you don't want to be focusing or looking at what's in the frame. You just want to be focusing on what's in the text. And when you get the text right, then everything else will be done properly for you. All right, the dial mode on the T5i, you can actually rotate this thing all the way around, which is kind of nice. But really, for video, when we're in video mode, we're only going to be really talking about one, and that's manual. However, you can shoot video in AV, TV, P, easy mode, you name it. It'll let you shoot video in just about all these different modes. But for the majority of the class, pretty much all of this course, we're going to be talking about M, manual mode. All right, T5i, we've got our on for power, and if we go a little bit further, we've got movie mode. So we can be in movie mode and manual and shoot a video. We could shoot it in AV, TV. You can be in a lot of different modes. Again, we're going to be mostly talking about M here. This might seem pretty obvious on the power side. Turning the camera off, you think you might have turned it off. I have gotten these cameras to lock up with me before, especially the T4i. I haven't gotten the T5i to lock up, but if it does happen to you, we're in the situation where you've turned the camera off and the display is still on. Basically, just go to the battery compartment, pull the battery out for about 10 seconds, put it back in, and you'll be good to go. It's basically the best way to reboot your computer or your camera. ISO. We're going to be doing a whole chapter on exposure and explaining what ISO is and giving you lots of examples. But for right now, think of it as the amount of gain that's applied to your sensor to make the image brighter. It's a pretty easy way to think of it for right now. All right, when we're in manual movie mode and we press the ISO button, we'll get a lot of different choices of what we can select. As the camera comes, it's just set in auto. If we move the mode dial to AV, TV, or whatever else you'd like to change it to, and we press the ISO button again, you'll see that a message displays basically saying you can't do it in movie mode. The main dial for us is pretty much going to control shutter speed in video mode for us. It's nice because it's kind of a set and forget type of thing, but again, we're going to be covering a lot of this exposure related items in the exposure chapter. All right, next up is our shutter button, and we're going to be using the shutter button to take photos that will relate to video, and we'll show you that later. But basically, you press it all the way down, creates a picture, but if you press it halfway down, it'll give you focus lock, and we're going to be using that for a certain focus mode called quick focus mode later. And you'll hear the beep. That indicates that you've got focus lock. If I put my hand in front of the lens, nothing's going to happen while I press the button down because it can't focus that close in, as we talked about before. I've only got my hand a few inches in front of the lens, so it needs to be, way out here, and then it can grab focus. Menu button. Press it once, you get into the menu. Press it again, you get out of the menu. We're going to have a whole entire chapter on the menu. Info button, you can cycle through a bunch of different screens on here, and we'll demonstrate this more later. Movie record button or live view button. If I'm in the movie mode with the switch all the way forward, if I press this button, it'll record. I press it again, it stops recording. If I go to photography mode, and if I hit this button, it goes into live view mode. If I press it again, it's not going to record video, it's just going to send me back out of live view mode. Quick menu button. We'll have a whole entire chapter on this, but basically if you hit the quick menu, you can get to items in terms of movies very quickly instead of diving deep into the menu. So it's a very handy button to have. It also has a blue printer symbol on it. It's more photography related, so we won't be discussing that at all. AV button. In order to control our aperture, we need to press in the AV and rotate the main dial to change the f-stop number or aperture. All right, cross keys that surround the set button. These are kind of your navigation buttons to go left or right or up and down. The text that you see here, like white balance and autofocus and etc., those won't do anything for us in video mode, unfortunately. But basically, it's a way to move cursors around on the screen. For instance, we're going to use that for some critical focus type stuff we're going to be working on, as well as navigating around in the menu system as well. And then the center set button is kind of, think of it as an enter button. So when you've gotten to a location that you want to select something, you'll be hitting the set button to choose an action. All right, let's talk about these two buttons up here. They do different things in different modes. Pretty much anything that you see on the back of the camera that is blue indicates some sort of playback function. So let's go to playback first, and we'll demonstrate what's going on here. We've got a plus and a minus. For us in photography, you'd be able to zoom, but here in video mode, we can't unfortunately zoom into a video. It would be nice. When we press the minus, we can step out several times and we can get different views in terms of playback of the tile modes for what video you want to play next or still. So when we're not in playback mode and we're recording something, let's say, in movie mode, if I press this button, the plus sign, we get a plus, an X1, a X5, and a 10 times. Press it again, it resets. This one on their side is the star button in this mode. And now if I press it, you'll see down here a little star appeared. So basically what that does is it locks your exposure. So if you have auto ISO turned on like we do right now, and I have locked exposure, if I bring this up towards where I fill the frame, the exposure didn't change. But if I hit the Q button right now and I delete this, get rid of the star, now when I reframe, you'll see the exposure change here and the exposure change here. So let's say I wanted to lock exposure on here, I'd press the star button, and then when I rotate, you'll see nothing changed. So it's a way to lock your exposure. Really don't recommend using it that way because we're going to show you how to do it manually and not use auto ISO. The play button and the erase button. Pretty obvious, hit the play button, now you hit the set button and it'll take you to the playback menu. So you can play it back in slow motion. You can travel to the first frame, previous frame, next frame, last frame. And the whole thing is this video snapshot feature we're not going to really talk about. But to play it back, you just go to the first one and then hit the center set button again, and then it'll play. And if you don't like the clip, you can just basically hit the trash can and go to erase that way. All right, down here is your access lamp. So if I hit record, you'll see it start to flash down here saying that basically things are being written to the card. It's going from the sensor to the buffer and being written to the card. And basically what it's telling you is, hey, when this is operating and I'm writing to the card, you don't want to power it down, you don't want to pull the battery out, and you don't want to open the SD card door open, because you'll usually get corrupted data. If you're lucky, you won't, but you'll interrupt the clip and it might corrupt the whole entire card. So you kind of watch out for that. And kind of an acid test for this type of card is you can take pictures while you're in video mode. So I'm going to go ahead and take some pictures here and watch the access lamp. And you can see it's saying, hey, I'm busy, I'm busy, I'm busy. But you can see the access lamp right now is all the way lit, and it's continuing to light, and it's basically the buffer is filling up and writing to the card as fast as it can. And as soon as the buffer recovers and the card recovers, you'll see that it'll start flashing again. All right, next up is our battery compartment door. Pretty obvious, but one little thing that you might not have known is this little pass-through cable door here. And if you want to, I've never done it, I don't own the accessory, but apparently you can buy an accessory that will keep your camera going without having to change out batteries. So if you need that type of accessory, there's your little access door. The tripod mount. So this is a 1/4-20 thread size. Basically, if you're new to this and this is your first camera and you're wondering what to order in terms of things that mount to your camera, because I remember when I first got mine, I was like, well, what is this difference between 1/4-20 and 3/8? So this is a 1/4-20, so it's a 1/4 inch diameter, and this will accept things like this mini tripod or a ball head or a fluid head plate. But like for instance right here, this fluid head that's mounted to this tripod, the thing that's attaching these two together is a 3/8. So I just want to clarify that, because I remember when I first started, I was like, well, what's the difference between a 3/8 and a 1/4? So the smaller one fits to your camera. The bigger one normally will mount like a ball head, fluid head to your actual tripod. All right, next up we have all the ports here on the side of the camera. The first one is a remote timer port. So you can plug in a remote timer. So basically like this device right here, I've had this one for several years. It's not a Canon one. You can buy one that's a lot cheaper. But basically you just take this and connect it into the side. And with this, you can create some stunning time lapses with this, which you can create into videos, like this one, for example. All right, next up is our microphone input. You can use a microphone input like this one, or the one like this particular microphone. You can plug directly into the camera. And I'll show you some settings of what I recommend with that later, but you just basically plug it in and you're ready to go. All right, next up is our AV out digital. So you can use a USB cable, which is the digital side of things, to connect up to your camera to your computer. Or you can use a cable like this. They don't supply these anymore. And the reason is this thing produces awesome HD video, and this is not HD video. But you can basically connect this AV out to like an old TV set. But what they should have supplied, and they didn't, is an HDMI cord, and that's what the next one here is you can connect your the HDMI mini to like a TV set, and then you can have high definition and audio passing over the cord, which is really nice. The depth of field preview button only works in photography mode, so it's only working when you're looking through the viewfinder or you're in live mode. Does absolutely nothing for us in video mode. Our lens mount release, basically you just press and rotate the lens off and put it back on. It'll just click in place. Here's our speaker on the back of the camera, and I'm going to show you later how to adjust the volume for it. Your SD card door, like we've demonstrated already, there's only one way to put the card in. Make sure it's closed all the way, because if it's not, nothing's going to happen. And you don't want to open up the card door while the lamp indicator light is running, because you can get corrupted data. This is your remote control sensor. This is for like an RC6, an external accessory that you can buy to remotely control the camera. I believe it does video mode. I don't own one of these. But you could definitely buy one and stand in front of the camera. Like what I'm doing right here, I'm using the EOS software to film myself because I got a computer right here. But you can divide devices where you can stand like the camera I'm filming with right now and start and stop it. The next one over, this right in the nook here is your, serves two functions. One is your red eye reduction, which is photography related, and also it's your countdown for photography, which is also photography related, so we don't really need to talk about that. So that pretty much finishes up all the buttons and switches on the camera. All right, next up, let's talk about SD cards. A common question I get a lot from people is, I have this message in the back of my camera. It says movie recording has stopped automatically. What's going on? A lot of times it has to do with the card. If you have an older card, perhaps it's not rated high enough in terms of speed. It won't be, the information that's coming off the buffer to the card. If it can't handle it, you're going to get this message. You'll actually see a buffer indicator light go up. It's kind of an LED scale. And when it gets to the maximum, and then you get that message usually about 30 seconds after you started recording. If you have a slow card, or maybe it's just like 5 seconds, if it's really slow, that's what's going on. So basically, like, this is one of my very first cards I bought. It's only 4 gig. I don't use it anymore because it's so slow. But if you look at my gear page, I've got several listed. Like, for instance, this manufacturer, this one I bought many years ago. It was really expensive. It was like 130 bucks. Prices have come down a lot. Like this card, I think I picked up on sale. And if you about once a month, they seem to go on sale. So if you watch for the sales, I think I bought this one for like, I don't know, 30 bucks. And it was, this one is 45 megabytes per second, sorry. It's 32 gig. And what's nice about this is you can use this both in, the Rebel line of cameras, and if you upgrade to like a 5D Mark III or a 6D, which has a different Kodak all-eye compression type Kodak, you can use this one as well. Why would you buy a faster card than this? And I do own faster cards. Like, I own the 95 megabytes per second card. And that card costs more money, but you can offload that faster card using like a US 3 interface much faster. So like twice as fast. So if a 32 gig card, if it's like full or almost full, where it maybe took, I don't know, 10 minutes with your, one of your slower cards. If you buy one of the faster cards, you could do it in like 5 minutes. And then if you have a really slow card, it might take you like 15, 20 minutes, depending on the card. And then depending on the connection that you have, you have USB 2, it's not going to help you much. If you have USB 3, it'll go much faster. So, you spent all this money on expensive glass, expensive camera, and this is kind of like your digital film. This is, you should take care of it. So one of the things I do is I have this Pelican case, and it's made out of plastic, but you can pretty much drive a truck over this thing and it won't. It's really heavy duty plastic. So what I do typically is when I'm done with the card, I basically just reverse it and put it like that, and that way I know it's done. And then I move on to the next card. And then a lot of times what I'll do is I'll at the end of the day, I'll then back it up to like a laptop computer. And another thing I do too is I've got these, like, this is like a 128, it's USB 3 storage drive, and then I'll stick that into the computer at night too after it's on the computer, and then I'll store it to this as well, and it's USB 3, so it writes and reads really quick. That'll be my second backup. So that's kind of how I work with cards. So again, if you're getting that message that recording has stopped automatically, and it's probably a no-name card or a very inexpensive card, it's not fast enough. And if you're wanting to know which ones that I use, just go look at my gear page, and I've got them listed, and those I've had extremely good luck with. And also on the side of corruption too. These don't get corrupted that often and lose data, so definitely check them out. All right, next up I want to talk about the Viewfinder. So when I first got the camera, I looked through the Viewfinder, it's like, oh, life's good, take a picture, stills, awesome. Flip it to video mode, hold it up to my eyes, like, I can't see anything, it's all black. But I can see the back of the screen, but I can't see through the viewfinder. Why? Why is that? So if we take the, turn the camera off, take the lens off, and then hold it up this way, basically what's happening is there's a mirror in here, and the light enters, hits the mirror, bounces up inside here, pentaprism, pentamirror, I can't remember on this particular camera, and comes out the viewfinder. So you're looking through the lens. So when you go to take a picture, the lens, the mirror flops up, flops down, just allows a amount of light in there to hit the sensor to properly expose. So it just boop, boop, up really fast. So what happens for us, when we go to video mode, the mirror locks up. And so the light enters just to the sensor, it doesn't get reflected up into here, and that's why you can't see. So, way to get around that, let's turn the camera back off again. We put a viewfinder on. This is the carry speed, it's a lot cheaper than the Zacuto. I got listed on my gear page. Put the lens back on. And so when we go to movie mode now, there's a couple things that are going to happen. One is when we hold it up to our eye, we're looking at the back of the screen, and we can do two things really nicely here. We can do things for exposure, and we can do things for critical focus. We can nail those in, because what happens when you're out in broad daylight and you're looking at the back of the screen, it's very hard to do those two things sometimes because you can barely see the screen. The other thing that's really nice about this type of thing is you get another point of contact. Instead of holding it out here, where it might be all shaky, when you pull it up to your eye, you got a point of contact and makes for a nice steady shot. So one of the things one last thing I want to show you before we move on, I'm going to take the lens off again. And one of the questions you might have is, well, if I take pictures, we can see the shutter going up and down. When I take a movie, isn't that shutter going up and down? It's not. It's locked up, and then there's an actual electronic shutter that we'll talk about later. All right, next up I want to talk about image stabilization and how useful it is for video. First off, we're going to turn it off. Obviously, if you've got a tripod, you should definitely use a tripod. A lot of times you're going to be handheld and you're not going to be able to do it. So what I'm going to do is try to track some cars. I've got this viewfinder, and it's going to offer point of contact, and we'll track this car coming. I'm trying to keep it right in the center of the white focus box. As you can see, I'm not doing that great of a job. All right, now I'm going to turn it on, and I hear a car coming. I'll hit record, and let's see how we do now. You can tell it feels so much smoother tracking that SUV. Very smooth. So definitely using image stabilization versus not using it is a lot better. So definitely give it a try. It's awesome for stills as well, because if you're shooting, let's say, at a 40th or 50th of a second, it's going to help you there. But for video, image stabilization is just awesome. So I would leave it on all the time, unless you're using a tripod, because and it depends on the lens. But most lenses in the manual will tell you to turn off the image stabilization while you have it mounted on a tripod. Next up, I want to talk about rolling shutter. So let me just demonstrate it for you really quickly. Off here we have a utility pole, and it's a nice vertical line, a shape. So I'm going to take the camera and I'm going to violently move it back and forth, and what I'm going to do is stop and freeze one of the frames for you, and you're going to notice that the utility pole is not like straight up and down, it's kind of skewed. So it's definitely something to watch out for. Obviously, don't violently shake your camera. But you're going to get that sometimes when you pan very quickly. I do a whip pan or something like that. It's just something to keep in mind, that you can have some, or when you're going to do it and you know you're going to have a whip pan type thing, try not to have horizontal lines in your shot too much, and there you wouldn't notice it as much. All right, next up we're going to talk about aliasing on a long side of road, so if you hear some cars going by. But I found a really good example of some power lines, and what we're going to do is, you can see the power lines are right here, And I'm going to go ahead and zoom in and zoom out, and I'm going to show you what aliasing is. So look at the power lines and see what happens to them as I zoom in and zoom out. And you can see that the lines are all jaggedy. I guess it's the best way I could describe it. They have a very jagged edge to them. And as you get closer, you can kind of see they almost have a kind of a magenta and cyan look to them on the edges as we get closer and closer. So that's pretty much what aliasing is. So now I'm shooting at 720, and for slow motion, this is where you're going to see it the worst. So what I'm going to do is let's switch this to 1080. All right, now I've switched to 1080, and let's go ahead and zoom in and see what we get. And as we get closer here, it's definitely not as bad as 720 at all. But there definitely is some there, especially right around this range. If I like pan over to the, definitely more towards around here. So that is what's aliasing is. Basically, these cameras always have a problem with horizontal lines. You're not going to get this with vertical lines. All right, next up we're going to talk about moire patterns. Again, since we don't have an anti-aliasing filter built in, we get aliasing and we get moire patterns. So what is a moire pattern? Best way I can describe it to you is this roof over here. If I hit record, so now I'm recording. See, I'm at 1/25th of a second, F10, and if I start to zoom out, because I focused on the roof tiles, what you're going to see is all these kind of patterns appear on the roof, especially as you zoom out. You can see them kind of dancing around. And if I zoom back in, see them dancing away. So let's say you're doing like a bike race, and there's a biker. Actually, your biker went right by. A lot of bikers go by on this road. So if let's say you're doing a bike race, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to focus in on the guardrail. So I'm going to stop recording for a second so I can punch in. And now instead of being on the roof, I'm on the guardrail. And when I zoom out, you're going to see it might be a little bit better, but gosh, it doesn't look that much better at all. So F10, the distance between the guardrail and those houses is pretty, it's not that great of a distance because I'm way far away because I'm using this 7200 on a crop sensor camera. Has a reach. It's not like it's zooming, but it has a reach of about 320 millimeters. So it feels like it's more of a telephoto on these crop sensor cameras. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to still shoot at 720, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the f-stop down from F10 while I'm recording here. I'm going to bring it all the way down. You can't see this on the screen obviously, but I'm going to bring it down to 3.5. And I'm going to take my ND filter and I'm going to slowly bring it in, and then I'll look at my meter and then bring it back down to where it was before. So what I'm going to do now is I'm still shooting at the guardrail, or focused on the guardrail, but now I'm shooting at f3.5, and let's see if that helps at all when I zoom in and zoom out. And sure enough, it looks like the roof is not doing any more oh, there's a little bit, right? There's a lot more right there. So there's a couple of things I can tell you, especially when you're shooting for slow motion, is like right here, you'll notice as I zoom in, the distance between the roof tiles becomes greater. And when they're at a certain point where the roof tiles are really tight together is where you're gonna get those moire patterns. So you either gotta zoom in or zoom out, or you gotta add like an ND filter if you're shooting outside like we are here, and shoot at a lower aperture, so aperture number, so you can get things like the roof out of focus. But you'll notice, this is a great example, I'm still focused on the guardrail. As I back up right around here, you'll start to see those moire patterns appear because it's like I'm pulling the camera farther away, and those roof tiles become closer and closer together, which creates those moire patterns.